This is Defiance Daily Dispatches for the Defiant. I am your host, Miles Taylor. Unfortunately, the guest that was going to be with us today is now going to be joining us tomorrow. We were going to welcome the incredible Scott Galloway onto the program today to talk about his big tech boycott, resist and unsubscribe. If you haven't heard about it, you're going to hear about it, but not today. You're going to hear about it tomorrow. Scott Galloway will be on the program with us. So make sure to mark your calendars for Friday at 5 p.m. Eastern. We are looking forward to that conversation. But in lieu of having Scott Galloway here today, we are going to be talking about the drama that is engulfing Washington, the Trump administration, and anyone who's concerned about voting infrastructure in the United States, because the scandal around the Office of the Director of National Intelligence and Tulsi Gabbard continues to grow. And we will tell you today why it's a big deal that Tulsi Gabbard's story of why she showed up in Georgia at an FBI raid and Donald Trump's story about why she was there or why he doesn't know she was there is problematic. Those stories do not align, and it is pointing to a cover-up. We're going to talk about that today. And then we will also talk about the fact that Donald Trump has decided to sue the federal government that he oversees for, get this, $10 billion that he wants to come to him personally. Now, Trump says he's going to donate the money, but you may be asking, why is the president of the United States suing his own government for $10 billion? We will tell you why in a little bit. And then you'll want to stay tuned until the end, folks, for our usual segment, Who is Joining the Defiance? You may be surprised at who that person is today at the end of the program. But let's start with Tulsi Gabbard, because the news today, and we wrote about this morning in defiance.news, so take a look at that article. We'll be talking about it in a moment. But the news today is that Donald Trump, in an interview, completely contradicted his director of national intelligence about why there is an effort to go into Fulton County, Georgia, to seize ballots, not ballots from a recent election, but ballots from the 2020 election. Now, Tulsi Gabbard has said that the reason she was there, the reason that there was a raid, has to do with as yet revealed foreign interference in that election. But more importantly, right now, Donald Trump claims, or at least claimed in an interview yesterday, that he didn't even know why there was a raid on the facility. In that exclusive interview with NBC last night, Donald Trump was once again asked why Tulsi Gabbard, his director of national intelligence, was at a raid of a top Georgia voting center in Fulton County. This is what he had to say.
Why is Tulsi Gabbard there?
I don't know, but you know, a lot of the cheating comes from it's international cheating. You have people, they say, from China trying to.
You put this on True Social.
Do you think China tries to influence our election?
We know that foreign governments try to influence a lot of things in this country.
Therefore, she's foreign governments.
But
she's
very important words there in that conversation. Donald Trump was asked, why was Tulsi Gabbard at that raid? His answer was, I don't know. Now, this comes after Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt and Tulsi herself contradicted the president. In fact, in a letter to Congress 2 days ago, in the first paragraph of the letter explaining why she was there, Tulsi Gabbard said she was at that raid at the personal request of the president. So one of the two is lying. Either the president of the United States is lying that he didn't know why Tulsi Gabbard was down there and that he actually did send her, or Tulsi Gabbard is lying and pretending that the president of the United States gave her authorization to be down there. Now, we talked about this a lot this morning in our piece on Defiance News, because there's actually a whole host of things that are problematic with this letter Tulsi Gabbard sent to Congress. In fact, we would go as far as to suggest that letter is no longer an explanation of why she was down there. It is a piece of evidence, because that letter contains an array of contradictions and misleading information about why the director of national intelligence, the top spy in the U.S. intelligence community, is involved in a domestic election investigation without any clear authority to do so. We urge you to read that piece. But in addition to the shifting narratives and the unclear explanations, there's another big red flag, which is that in that same interview with NBC News, the president suggested that the reason that the FBI agents were down there was, in his words, to find out who the real winner was in the 2020 election. This is a bombshell, folks. This is a huge red flag, and we're going to talk about it a little bit more with my co-founder in a moment. But the president of the United States in that interview seemed to be saying that his director of national intelligence was wrong, because this really wasn't about foreign interference, seemed to be suggesting that whatever affidavit the FBI submitted to a magistrate judge was wrong, and that's not why they were looking into it, but that the goal here was to go find out who won the 2020 election. Let me put a finer point on this. The federal government does not run elections. States do. If Donald Trump did indeed direct his team to go into an election center in Fulton County, Georgia, to seize the ballots, to recount them, that would be an unauthorized and unconstitutional federal recount of an election carried out by FBI agents who have no role whatsoever in recounts of elections. Put another way, that would be illegal. That's why I say Tulsi Gabbard's letter and the shifting explanations outside of this administration are not about a narrative. Those are now evidence. Those are now evidence for, I hope, congressional investigators, at least in the Democratic opposition, to start to look into what the administration is doing here. Where there is smoke, there is fire, folks. And there is an awful lot of smoke coming out of this administration. Now, as I've talked about here and on other programs, one of the things in that letter that Tulsi Gabbard states as justification for being down there in Georgia is Executive Order 13848, which is an executive order that, unfortunately for her, I know a lot about because I helped write it in the last Trump administration. In 2018, I helped co-author this executive order on your screen that gives the president of the United States the authority not to go seize ballots, not to send his spy chief into election centers. It gives the president the authority to issue sanctions against foreign governments that meddle in our elections. And what powers does it give the director of national intelligence? It gives him or her the power to write a report. And here's what's also damning. It gives the director of national intelligence the power to write a report 45 days after an election to determine whether or not that election was secure. We are more than 5 years after the 2020 election. So when Tulsi Gabbard writes a letter to Congress and says, don't worry, I'm down there because I have the authority by virtue of this executive order from the president, she is misleading you and she is misleading Congress. That is not the purpose of the order. It doesn't give her those powers. She is overstating it, which to me suggests something else is being covered up. Now, Donald Trump must have somehow gotten the memo today that there were contradictions in what he was saying and what Tulsi Gabbard was saying, and he seemed to be somewhat back on script this morning at a national prayer breakfast. Take a watch.
We have our director of national and international intelligence, Tulsi Gabbard, who's doing a great job. Where's Tulsi? She took a lot of heat 2 days ago because she went in at Pam's insistence. She went in and she looked at votes that want to be checked out from Georgia.
By on message, what I meant to say is Donald Trump is now pointing the fingers at someone else. In fact, if you look it up on social media, Congressman Dan Goldman posted the perfect meme for this. 3 Spider-Men pointing at each other. One face Donald Trump, one face Tulsi Gabbard, one face the Attorney General Pam Bondi. So was it Donald Trump who ordered the raid of this facility? Was it Pam Bondi who ordered the raid of this facility? Was it the Director of National Intelligence? And who told the Director of National Intelligence that she could be down there in contradiction of her existing duties to focus on foreign threats? Was it the president that told her to be down there? Was it the Attorney General that told her to be down there? And why? And so far, no one, including the president, has further explained his comments to NBC News that the purpose of this raid effectively was for the FBI to determine who actually won the 2020 election. I will remind you, once again, folks, if that was the purpose of this raid, it was flagrantly illegal, and there should be an immediate investigation. And the president in the Oval Office And a conversation with Tom Lamas at NBC seems to have suggested that was the fact. But there's another controversy that's further compounding this one, and it also has to do with Tulsi Gabbard, and it also has to do with election systems. Developing news has come to light that voters in Georgia are not the only Americans in the crosshairs of the Director of National Intelligence. Last night, news broke that back in the spring of 2015, the Office of the Director of National Intelligence obtained and tested voting machines from Puerto Rico. Spring of 2025, sorry. In a statement to CNN on Wednesday, ODNI said that it examined the machines for security vulnerabilities, calling what it found, quote, extremely concerning, with the agency's main public claim focusing on one thing: cellular modems. Now, in a statement to CNN, the Office of the Director of National Intelligence said the voting system that they examined in Puerto Rico relied on extensive use of cellular modems, including connections to cellular networks outside of the United States. The agency did not release any technical details or evidence, but here's what's important. Election security experts say the claim, as presented, is misleading. For instance, Kevin Skoglund, a nationally recognized voting machine cybersecurity expert, told CNN that the use of modems alone is not unusual and does not indicate tampering. Skoglund said modems are sometimes used briefly at the end of election night to transmit encrypted vote totals to election headquarters, which aren't always in the same place as the machine where people go and vote. He noted that they are typically external, plugged in for only minutes, and then removed afterwards. This is his quote: "I know this because in 2018, I was one of the experts that discovered and improved the security of over 35 jurisdictions that were using such modems." Now, Puerto Rico's system also relies on hand-marked paper ballots and prints vote totals at each precinct, creating a paper trail that can be audited and recounted, experts say. Now, ODNI has not said when the machines were obtained, how long they were tested, or whether there were plans to release its findings publicly, or why it even did this investigation in the first place. Puerto Rico election officials have not yet commented. Now, it's clear here that Gabbard and the White House are propping up a potential narrative of foreign election interference. However, as we mentioned, they have yet to release any proof. And at today's White House press conference, one reporter asked White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt exactly this: where is the proof?
On what you said about foreign interference, you talked about 2016 and Russian interference, but what we've learned from these Georgia officials is what was seized by the FBI were ballots from 2020 in this Fulton County election center. Do you have any evidence that there was international interference in the 2020 election in this election center?
What I do have evidence of, and what the media seems to be undermining, is why Tulsi Gabbard is there in the first place. And I would point you again to federal law that clearly assigns the DNI and the office with the statutory responsibility to lead counter intel matters related to election security. This includes assessing risks to election voting systems, software, voter registration databases, and more, and analyzing foreign interference. And the ODNI is responsible for supporting the White House interagency action to secure our elections through intel analysis and vulnerability assessments. And they should be routinely collaborating with agencies like the DHS, the DOJ, and the FBI. So as for that question, it would be better suited to ask the Director of National Intelligence herself in her office.
I'm going to bring into the conversation my Defiance.org co-founder, Xander Schultz, to talk about all of this. Xander, I'm just going to say right off the bat, I'm going to demystify this for folks, and I'm going to give you my speculation about what's happening. And this is pretty informed speculation because I spent years working on election security in the U.S. government, in the Republican Party, in the first Trump administration. My speculation here is that all they're doing is revisiting the election Donald Trump claims he lost. And they know it's not legal for them to go seize ballots. And they're trying to find this ridiculous loophole and say there was foreign interference years ago that we're investigating. And so we're going to use those powers we have to investigate foreign interference to really secretly do what Donald Trump wants, is see if there's any proof that he can find somewhere that he actually won the election, or to create doubt about who won the election. I mean, is that not obvious to everyone who's watching this? Tell me if you think I'm wrong. And you're muted. This is a classic.
We were on a nice streak. We were on a nice streak. It's funny you say that. When we were on, I just ChatGPT'd, how do narcissists react when facts contradict their beliefs? Its answer with denial, rage, blame shifting, gaslighting, or rewriting the story to protect their self-image. Like, does that not all fit exactly what we're seeing, and we're all being punished for his narcissism? It's crazy. Good thing Carolyn Levitt, is at least holding us all together with her grace. It's just just going after everyone who asks a reasonable question with just spite and fury. He's infected his whole administration with that same attitude at this point. I miss the days where he at least delegated his nonsense to good people below him who did their best and then eventually resigned, like yourself.
Well, look, one of the things that I would say here is some people should be resigning in this administration after all of these contradictions, but there's something really, really amazing about Tulsi Gabbard trying to justify that she was there. I'm going to point to another thing that was in this letter, Xander, that she sends to Congress, which, by the way, let me take one step back. I don't know what that famous quote is from Shakespeare. It's in one of his plays, thou doth protest too much, right? Basically, if you're over-explaining, it's a sign of guilt. And she's got this 3-page letter of like a half dozen explanations about why she was down there in Georgia and why she was allowed to be, which right off the bat suggests, okay, you're hiding something. You're over-explaining why you're down there. But then incredibly, Tulsi Gabbard said she didn't see the warrant and she didn't even know what the probable cause for the search was. That's interesting, Xander, because Tulsi Gabbard also says the reason she was down there was at the direction of the president and that her lawyers told her she was allowed to be there. So wait a second. If her lawyers and the general counsel of the Office of the Director of National Intelligence authorized this, but they didn't know what it was for, how could they authorize it? Right. How could both of those things be true? Right. How could she get approval to participate in this, but not know what she was participating in? You really want me to believe that someone, the president or some FBI agent, phoned the Director of National Intelligence and said, hey, something really cool is going to happen in Georgia. You should be there. Mm-hmm. Showed up. Mm-hmm. So again, another potential contradiction or a lie. She either knew what was in the warrant, knew what the probable cause was, knew what the thing being investigated was, and got approval to be there and got legal clearance, or she didn't, and she lied to Congress after the fact. I mean, this apparently looks like another contradiction in the explanation. But I mean, you don't even need to dig into the nuances as a normal person to say it's fishy as hell for the nation's top spy to be at an election facility taking Americans' secret ballots, hauling them away in the equivalent of a U-Haul.
Yeah, I wasn't going to mention this because I didn't want to have too many digressions. But the other ChatGPT search I searched while you were speaking about this was, what are the hallmarks of mafia leaders when they speak publicly? And it said they speak in calm, vague, indirect language, avoiding specifics, denying authority, and using coded phrases that maintain plausible deniability. And that feels like what we're getting from every member of this administration, starting at the top.
Yeah, well, right there. And you saw that today with Donald Trump saying, I didn't know she was there, to it wasn't me that told her it could be there, it was the attorney general, to Gabbard saying, actually, it was the president who could tell me to be there. If that was the only piece of evidence we had, the president, attorney general, and the director of national intelligence pointing fingers at each other about who allowed her to be there, that would be enough of a red flag for us to say, this looks really suspicious. Maybe Congress should open an investigation. Am I right?
Miles, I think a lot of people hearing this, it's obviously causing people to worry a lot. And one thing we went over at our monthly member meeting yesterday was reassuring people in how our elections actually work in this country. So you want to take a beat just as we're seeing this attack all over, how the voting machines work, how the elections are administered. I think it's good timing to do a 101 to understand how resilient our system is, because to your point you made yesterday, we were prepping for pretty serious attacks from folks like the Russians who have pretty compelling means.
Yeah, I mean, look, here's the big picture for folks. They need to remember, when you go vote in an election, the federal government's not in charge of that. Your state and your state legislature sets the time and manner of elections that are then administered locally. That's how it happens. And that's not some coincidence. That's not some tradition. That's how the US Constitution indicates it. In fact, Xander, if you can find it, you found the best quote the other day from James Madison about the reason why we don't have the federal government administer elections. And I want you to read that in a second, because it's a very powerful encapsulation from more than 200 years ago about why we do this. But we do that for a very important reason, so that the federal government does not have all-seeing power over the American people and how they vote and who is electing them to office. Donald Trump doesn't seem to respect that. Donald Trump this past month expressed a desire to nationalize elections in violation of the Constitution. And then we aired it on the program earlier this week. Republicans in Congress tried to cover for him. Senator John Thune and House Speaker Mike Johnson said, no, that's not what the president meant. He was just talking about the SAVE Act and some of these reforms that we want to make to electoral infrastructure. And then true to form, yesterday in his interview with NBC, Donald Trump again doubled down and said, nah, look, states are just agents of the federal government. We should have more authority to take control of these elections. That's what Donald Trump means when he says it. We have to take him seriously and literally. But Xander, you got that James Madison quote?
I text you it after our meeting yesterday. I got to go find it. I know exactly what you're talking about. It was a great quote. I'll hunt it down.
Same.
There was the word perversion in it somewhere, I believe.
Yeah, I think I've got it here somewhere. I'll find it. But look, I mean, the point being, there's a really good reason we create that separation. But this goes to the heart of what's happening here. The administration is telling us two different things. On the one hand, there is this very threadbare excuse that there's mysterious foreign interference that happened in our elections 5 years ago. Now, I want to put a caveat here. The bad guys are interfering with our elections all the time. I'm not denying that. The Russians interfered in 2016. The Chinese tried to interfere a couple of years later. These things were reported by the intelligence community. I was very involved in efforts to keep our bad guys from interfering in our elections. That's a real thing. What's really bizarre about this, though, is that when I was in the Trump administration, Donald Trump wanted to hear nothing about foreign interference in our elections, wanted nothing to do with it, didn't want to sign these executive orders because, my speculation, he was happy that foreign governments were interfering if it helped them. Now, years later, when he's trying to find an excuse to go revisit the 2020 election, all of a sudden, he's very worried about foreign interference in those elections. So very serious question to all of you. Do you think Donald Trump came back into office and stumbled upon some mysterious information that for the past 5 years has eluded the federal government about specific interference in 2020, and specifically in a state where Donald Trump wanted to go find 11,000 imaginary ballots to help him win? Or do you think it's more likely that this is a lie, and that this is a lie to get the president's hands on ballots that he was trying to get his hands on? And if you want some guidance in reaching a conclusion, this is the exact quote from Trump's interview yesterday with NBC News. Quote, "There should be nothing wrong with the fact that they, the FBI, went in, got ballots from a while ago, and they're going to look at them. And now they're going to find out the true winner." Xander, I can't think of a clearer smoking gun than that. The president just said, by the way, FBI agents who he didn't know, he says he doesn't know why they were down there. He doesn't know why Tulsi Gabbard's down there, but apparently he knows enough to say the agents were there to find out the true winner of the 2020 election.
Yeah.
Unbelievable.
Look, I didn't want you to explain the system just to, so everyone feels safe, but I want you, there's so many ways that these folks can mess with the outcomes. I mean, you think about the information environment that, I think at one point we hoped DC would address the ways in which our social media feeds were being influenced by outside powers, and the algorithms were being let run wild. And so there are very real ways that these midterms are at risk because of an unwillingness from the federal government to address real problems, including foreign interference that's taking place in our information environment that likely will take place in the form of 1960s style intimidation, Miles, you and I spoke about yesterday, that we may see from federal officers. And so I didn't mean to say don't worry about this specifically. This broadly, we need to protect our election. I think it is clearly becoming the overwhelming top issue moving forward into the midterms, outside of, Miles, what you coined, too big to rig, just winning the midterms by such large margins that no matter what the effort is, that we walk away and win this thing. But I just wanted to call out the information environment, some of the other things, because a lot of the damage that we're seeing done is through this unwillingness by our federal government to get their arms around the ways that the current system is being exploited in our information.
Well, and I'll say this before we move on. Like, that is, I'm glad you pointed that out. And sorry I got sidetracked, because it is important for folks to know it's really hard to rig an American election. And I'm speaking not just to MAGA folks right now. I'm speaking to folks that consider themselves to be on the pro-democracy side and the political opposition side. I see election conspiracies come from both sides. And you can write in the comments and say, Miles is being a both sides, or, well, I'm sorry. I've seen just as many Dems as Republicans cook up conspiracy theories about people meddling in elections and changing the vote tallies, and, this election or that election was stolen. This always happens. We need to recognize it in ourselves. When our side loses, our gut instinct is, well, someone must have cheated us because I was so sure that we were going to win. Donald Trump does it more than anyone. But I'm saying it that way because what I want to tell folks, especially in the pro-democracy coalition, is it's really hard to secretly rig an American election. Why? For those reasons I described earlier. Your elections are locally administered. If someone wants to go tamper with ballots, they've got to have an army of people around the country to make that happen. You say, well, what about the electronic voting machines? These voting machines are audited by cybersecurity experts at the local level, at the state level, at the federal level. There are layers and layers of redundancy in the process. And by the way, most of these systems basically print a receipt. In other words, when in doubt, even if some crazy bad guy somehow manipulated the digital totals, when a person leaves with a lot of these machines, they see who they voted for, and there's a hard copy record of that can be audited in a recount. You don't have to believe me. Go trust the Russians. And I say trust the Russians because they spent untold amounts of money, put hundreds of people at trying to hack the American election in 2016, and they ultimately settled for it was a lot cheaper to pretend that they rigged the result because they realized how hard it was to hack our elections because they are so diffuse and they are so fractured. Now, I say that because the likeliest thing Donald Trump is going to do is not some unseen mechanism to change the vote totals that you're never going to know about. It's the things that we can see. And those are also the things that we can stop. He's going to spread lies about the election, lies that we can contradict and lies that we can counter with the truth. He is going to try to physically intimidate people from voting, physical intimidation that we can circumvent by giving people the confidence to show up at the polls. These are tried and tested tactics of authoritarians to try to manipulate the elections. And unfortunately, it's happened here in the United States before. We've had voter suppression efforts from the top focused on minority communities in this country to keep them from turning out to rig elections. Those are the tactics that we should expect. We don't even need to resort to the conspiracy theories because they're going to fall back on the things that they think will work to try to suppress the vote. That's where we need to be focused, Xander.
Yeah, I know. I see Mercedes highlighting that we need to keep rolling here. The last thing I just want to add is, as we talk about him spreading lies and us sharing the truth, it's important to make sure we are continuing to build out our coalition with people who can reach his audience. And you're starting to see that. I think we highlight Andrew Schultz the other day. I just sent a video over to you two this morning about a famous gun tuber, a 2A influencer that's calling out, what he's seeing. Being able to make sure, that we piece together a large network of these influencers. So as he spread lies, we are not only obviously, combating them with the truth to our own networks, but building out this odd bedfellow coalition that can get the truth out to as many Americans as possible. I think that's a great project for us at Defiance and then the pro-democracy space more broadly as we move towards the midterms. Yeah. We're going to need all hands on deck. We're going to be talking about that a lot, including next week and the week after and at the State of the Union rebuttal, which we'll talk about. Let me take us into the second story before we get fired by our producer. $10 billion lawsuit
Okay, we said this at the top of the program. If you are not following this story, folks, this is another whopper. This was reported last week that Donald Trump, your president of the United States, has sued the Internal Revenue Service seeking at least $10 billion in damages over the leak of his tax returns. Now, that lawsuit was filed in federal court in Florida, a place that Donald Trump likes to file lawsuits because he's got friendly judges, and names the IRS and the Treasury Department that he oversees as defendants. Now, Trump filed alongside Eric Trump, Donald Trump Jr., and the Trump Organization. Confident that he will win the upcoming lawsuit, Trump told NBC reporter Tom Lamas in that same interview last night that we talked about what he plans to do with the money.
Essentially, the lawsuit's been won. I guess I won a lot of money.
How would this work, though? Scott Bessent's the head of the IRS.
I know. What I would
Pam
do-
Bondi is the head of the Justice Department. They're going to defend the IRS against you. You're their boss.
Well, there's never been anything like it, in all fairness.
So are you going to tell them to pay you?
Don't forget, I sued as a private citizen because I sued between terms. I won
But are you
3
going to tell them
times.
to pay you?
I won 3 times, but I didn't assume, unfortunately for this country, I didn't assume office the second time. But here's the story. I sued because they broke into Mar-a-Lago. That was before I became president. Now it goes along, and it turned out that the suit is a very strong suit.
You're going to tell them to pay you, though? Because you're the boss.
Well, what I would do, tell them to pay me, but I'll give 100% of the money to charity. I don't want any of the money.
You take it out of the system. A couple more questions here.
No, I'm putting it back into the system.
Yeah.
If I give money to American Cancer Society, I will give 100% of the money away to charity. I don't want any of it.
$30 trillion debt, and we're going to take $10 billion out of the system?
Well, I mean, you give it away anyway. They give away a lot of money.
Your endorsement
I'll
is
tell
the
you
money.
what,
Yeah.
speaking about that, Minnesota and these other states, we have massive investigations going into fraud.
Yeah.
Do you know if we captured
Now, today, at a continued hearing in front of the Financial Stability Oversight Council, Secretary of Treasury Scott Bessent was questioned by Arizona Representative Ruben Gallego on who is truly footing the bill for this proposed philanthropic venture.
Sir, Senator Gallego.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Secretary Besson, thank you again for being here today. We kind of touched on this earlier. In addition to being Treasury Secretary, you are serving as Acting Director of the IRS. So following up on Senator Kim's questioning, so you are fully aware that the President is suing your agency for $10 billion.
Yes.
We would agree. Would you agree that $10 billion is a good sum of money?
Yes, sir.
Where would that be cut from? Let's say for some reason he actually wins that lawsuit. Where would that $10 billion come from?
Again, it would come from.
Process-wise. I'm not asking like your opinion whether it's right or wrong.
It would come from Treasury,
It comes from Treasury, which comes from the general fund,
the Treasury General Account.
so taxpayers.
Yes.
So taxpayers would be giving Donald Trump $10 billion. I'm going to bring back into the conversation my Defiance.org co-founder, Xander Schultz. Xander, the president of the United States, who is the boss of these agencies, is now suing his employees, and they have to decide whether to fight him or settle and give him the cash. Do you think if you and I sued our producer, Mercedes, for money that the organization had, she would decide to fight us, or she would just have to, give up the cash or lose her job?
I actually think Mercedes has a lot more
Her
fucking
producer is
integrity.
sitting on the window like, what are you talking about?
She has
This
a lot
is
more
insane.
integrity than Scott Bessent. She would fucking resign before she handed over a check.
That's right. She would do the
Yeah.
courageous thing, but I'm not expecting that of either of these.
No, not from these guys. Obviously, they sold their soul a long time ago. It's so bizarre. The thing I can't wrap my mind around, because this is the second time he sued for damages. The guy's the sitting president of the United States. How much could anything have possibly hurt him if his current position is president of the United States worth billions of dollars? It's very hard for me to wrap my mind around. Anyways, I don't know. Does it get this? It feels like it should get this.
I think so. I was sad that you didn't put that one up in the first segment, because I think the president of the United States potentially sending FBI agents in to seize ballots from 5 years ago to do their own hand recount seems pretty impeachable.
Yeah. You know what? It was starting to become my only contribution on the show, though, and I wanted to have a little more than just holding up a paper sign.
Look, we have a big budget here at Defiance Daily for animations, and you have no idea how long it took to do that animation.
It was very challenging.
Well, I mean, look, I'll also say this on that story, Xander, is you said something offhandedly when we started this segment that I think we all need to give consideration to, which is the obvious thing Mercedes would do if we did this to her. The obvious thing Donald Trump's team should do if he's doing this to him is they should resign and protest. Boss, it's clearly a conflict of interest, maybe even illegal, that you're using your position to sue this government that you oversee for money that will go to yourself. Don't pay any attention, folks, to Donald Trump's pledge to send it to charity. Remember that there is a long history over many decades of Donald Trump saying he's going to give money to charity and never giving it. If you forgot about that in the 2016 election, it was a huge scandal during 2016, is all the times Trump said he was going to give to charity and never gave the money. But also what Donald Trump didn't pledge to do there is that he didn't say, well, I won't take the tax write-off. Right? Donald Trump, if he gets $10 billion from the government, is he going to take the tax write-off for his businesses, for the Trump organization? Well, that puts more money in his pocket. He didn't say anything about that. I thought that was pretty interesting.
Yeah, well, he famously said he doesn't pay taxes because he's smart. So maybe this is one of those things. This probably qualifies as one of his smart tactics. I don't know. I don't have much to say here, Miles. I'm so overwhelmed by fury about this guy potentially taking $10 billion of regular people's money to dump it into his own bank account for him. It's just absurd. I don't know. I'm sorry.
If other people are as angry as Xander, let me say this. That's why we're here. That's why we're doing this. That's why we're in this fight. And I would urge you, if you are not a defiance.org follower or member or subscriber, follow us, because some of the groups we support are the groups that are suing the Trump administration over these types of actions. That's where we are winning. That's where we are on the offensive against Donald Trump, is in courts of law. Article 3 of the United States Constitution gives us a remedy for a lawless president. And those are the courts, to enforce the law, to restore the rule of law. And Donald Trump has actually continued to lose case after case after case in the courts. So one of the organizations that we've been supporting is Democracy Defenders Fund. They've been one of the lead plaintiffs in a lot of these cases against the Trump administration, supporting a number of other groups in the weeks and months to come. Come be a part of what we're doing over here to take the fight to Donald Trump over these abuses of power. So if you're not subscribing or following, please do. Check out defiance.org, sign up for free for our updates, and decide if you want to become a member of the Club for Courageous Americans.
I want to add one thing, because I finally was able to pull a thought together. This is the type of stuff that needs to be front and center to his base, right?
Yeah.
His base hates corruption, supposedly. They hate DC getting with stealing everyone's money and not working on their behalf. Somehow we've got to find a way to get this type of information to his base in ways that they can receive and take in, because there's no good narrative around this. There's no good way to explain this away, why he needs to take their money and pocket it. And so, I sound a little bit like a broken record here, but I keep thinking, the supermajority coalition we need to build is inclusive of some of those people. And of late, he's been doing things that violate their principles over and over and over again, whether it's the murder of Alex Preddy because he's carrying a gun lawfully, or things like this naked corruption in DC and this theft of taxpayer money. That's a nut we've got to crack. We've got to crack over the next, however many months we have until midterms.
I'll say it again. Highlighting the hypocrisy is one of the most effective ways to get people to start thinking for themselves. You don't have to say to your friend or Trump voter, aren't you enraged? He's the worst. He's terrible. Just say, isn't it kind of bad that he campaigned on the Second Amendment, but now he's saying you're not allowed to lawfully carry a gun in public? Isn't it bad that he went after the so-called Biden crime family, but now he's making all this money off of us? I mean, you could go on and on with those, but Xander, that's such a great point because that's what's happening here. It's not any more complicated than Donald Trump saying, I want to raid the Treasury for myself. We do have happier news tonight. Our third and final story today is this, that a 10-year-old Minnesota girl is free tonight after spending a month in federal immigration detention. That 10-year-old girl is Elizabeth Zuna Casaguano, and her mother and her were released late Tuesday from an ICE facility in Dilley, Texas. They are now heading back to Minnesota to reunite with Elizabeth's father. She's a fourth grader from Columbia Heights, a Minnesota suburb, and she and her mother were taken into custody by ICE on January 6th while they were on the way to school. School officials say Elizabeth acted as an interpreter during the arrest, calling her father and telling him agents would soon be dropped off at school. She never arrived. By the end of that day, Elizabeth and her mother had been flown to Texas. The family is in Ecuador and has an active asylum case. Their attorney says they followed every required legal step and should never have been detained. Elizabeth's case was then assigned to a judge who had already ordered the release of another Minnesota child. You've heard about that child, 5-year-old Liam Conejo Ramos. And that judge then blocked Elizabeth's removal from the country on Monday and gave the government 5 days to respond. She was released the next night. Her principal says Elizabeth believed she was being sent back to Ecuador and feared her dreams were over. She wants to be a doctor. Advocates say the case highlights the trauma of family detention. Federal data shows thousands of children, some as young as 1 or 2, have been held in immigrant family detention in recent years. But tonight, Elizabeth is coming home. And advocates say many other children are still on the inside. Xander, I want to bring you back in on this one.
What's the word on these families receiving damages after all this? You know, you hear about police departments being sued all the time. Miles, do you have any sense of countersuits against this administration? I hope all these families end up with a big check at the end of this.
Yeah, I think they should. I mean, I'll tell you this. Like you and I have talked about before, I had a front row seat to the catastrophe that was family separation in the first Trump administration. And I will say some of those families rightfully sued the federal government after the fact. I can't say too much more than this, but I've consulted with some of those families because they deserve damages for being unlawfully held in inappropriate conditions when it was a foreseeable situation that the federal government could have prevented. We are seeing that again in these cases. Foreseeable catastrophe where the government's got people in places and in conditions they shouldn't be. And I think, I don't know the specifics of all of these cases, but surely in some of them, there is a cause of action here for these people to sue the federal government for damages. And again, some of those folks in the family separation debacle have won their cases or seen their cases advanced partly on similar grounds. So, I think there's going to be a flurry of those things after the second Trump administration. But what we're seeing here is wrong. I mean, what we are seeing here is flat out wrong. And let me help people understand the family thing. This is why ICE in any other normal time, let's call it the Obama administration, this is why ICE is supposed to handle cases involving families extremely delicately, because under the law, children, this is because of court decisions in this country, children are they're not allowed to be held in regular ICE detention facilities for an extended period of time. Why is that? Because a lot of these facilities, and I've visited them, they're just concrete slabs. They are concrete slabs. They are totally and completely unsuitable for a child. Okay? And so judges have ordered that after a certain amount of time, those children have to be taken into custody of Health and Human Services. That's another department. And HHS puts them in places where they can be cared for. But here's the problem, Xander. If that happens, the parents don't get to come with. So that's why ICE has a limited number of family detention centers. Look, just because someone's a family doesn't automatically allow them to stay in the United States. If they came in illegally and they're being deported, fine, but they should be deported humanely. They should be deported together. And that's why there are facilities for it. But here's the problem. When the administration starts ramping up immigration enforcement, well, those facilities, they fill up like that. And that means then the government either decides to keep children in shitty facilities that are just meant to be overnight facilities for adults, or they split up the family and send the kid into Health and Human Services custody and keep processing the parent. And then it's a bureaucratic nightmare to figure out where is the child, where is the parent, how and when do they get reunited? And you know who does a very bad job of that? The federal government, a very, very bad job. So this is a foreseeable consequence of ramping up immigration enforcement without the proper facilities, is that you're going to end up with kids in terrible conditions and or separated from their parents. But we lived through this nightmare. Did we not learn anything in the family separation debacle? So I'm disgusted in seeing this, Xander. And it's also another reason that it's really important for us to support some of these groups that are fighting for these families. Defiance.org has pointed people towards those groups. Last week, we pointed folks to different immigrant right groups that they can support in Minnesota. And I would urge folks to go take a look at that episode.
I spent 10 years working in the refugee crisis, and specifically worked at a refugee camp called Moria. Moria was built for 4,000 people. This is in Lesbos, Greece. It had 20,000 people oftentimes. So it was beyond capacity, 10,000 children. And I imagine it looked similar in some ways to what you're talking about. It wasn't a detention center, but it was isolated and there was nothing but cement around. What those places do to children is terrible. It takes away your why. What am I building towards? What are my days filled with? The mothers are so beaten down. They heroically do their best to support their children and still try to engage them in their imagination. But with what? There's no tools, there's no resources. So what my wife and I did was we rented a warehouse right next to that refugee camp and turned it into a women and children's center. So it had those programs and had those toys and had all the things that you would hope to engage children and also their mothers, yoga classes, therapy, all that stuff. But man, is there any other better litmus test of a society's right to even exist than how we treat children? I don't know if there is. And between the Epstein thing and this fucking thing, we've got to really, I hope after Trump, we are willing to, I don't mean tear this down as in tear society down, but look deeply at all of our processes. Because I think what Trump's really done well is force us to be more transparent about how these different industries work, how these different sectors work, what we're doing to people. There's so much suffering at the fringes of our society that not all of us have visibility into because of economics, because of race. And we need to take this moment, not to just get rid of this guy, but reaffirm our values as a country and then go fucking live them.
Right there with you, my man. Right there with you. This is one of those issues, I got to say, that since having a kid, I mean, you and I are both the fathers of young little ones. It doesn't change your perspective because, I mean, you know what right and wrong is, but it makes it so much more visceral when you see like the case of Liam Ramos. It really does. It makes it so much more visceral. And I'd like to say that it doesn't make it that more powerful, that somehow, I was just as aghast by this before kids than after kids, but it's profound. It's absolutely profound. And unfortunately, this could be just the beginning. I mean, you've heard me say before, and I've been warning for the last 6 years, that at the end of the first Trump administration, after me and a few others jumped in to get the president's children to convince him to end the family separation policy, which almost got me fired at that time. Again and again and again, the president in private meetings with us was furious. He was furious that we backed him into a corner and got him to walk off that policy because he said he wanted to see that policy. He wanted to take it further, and he threatened us, and at turns demanded that we reinstate it, but in his words, put the program on steroids. So my warning for the past 6 years has been, among many other things, on immigration. If he comes back, he's not just going to institute a policy that has the terrible foreseeable secondary consequence of ripping kids away from their parents. He'll implement the worst version that he wanted to put in place, deliberately taking a kid away from mom or dad and saying, we're not going to let you go with them. You're not going to be with your parent anymore. That's what he wanted to do. And the only reason, America, you haven't seen him do that yet is because they're no longer accepting people at the southern border. You used to be able to show up and claim asylum. Now that's going in front of the Supreme Court. I think it's possible, if not likely, that the Supreme Court's going to rule it was illegal for the Trump team to turn off asylum claims at the border. But mark my words, if they turn them back on and they allow people to arrive at the border with their children with asylum claims, Trump is committed to reinstating family separation, which will mean he'll say, we'll take your kid and we're sending you out of here. It's really scary stuff. But Xander, I want to close today with talking about who is joining the Defiance. This is another uplifter usually. Last night was a big night in wrestling. This is why I told you you might not expect this one. The AEW World Championship, that's the All Elite Wrestling Championship, was held in Las Vegas. And at the center of the match was Brody King, who back in July raised $27,000 to help families affected by ICE raids. Now, while Brody has been no stranger to speaking out against ICE and Trump, something unprecedented happened last night. Broadcast for all the world to see.
MJF, Brody King, AEW World Championship Eliminator match. A match that the champion wants absolutely no part of.
Now the face in the eyes of the champion.
I thought that was pretty cool, Xander.
I was chanting. Mercedes had me on mute. I was chanting. That felt good.
We censored you.
Yeah, I appreciate it.
Well, I think it's obvious. The answer to who is joining the Defiance isn't even Brody, but it's the wrestling fans themselves. That was pretty cool.
Another piece of evidence that the coalition is getting wider, it's getting broader, and only if we move with hubris in this moment and we don't extend bridges do we lose in this moment. We've got to think about how to seize these moments. These are moments we couldn't have dreamed of, right? Police being racially profiled, pro wrestling crowds screaming "fuck ICE." Like, how do we seize these moments and welcome them into this community? It's a great question for us. I know I sound like a broken record on this, but it's partially why I think, Defiance is somewhat built to react to this moment, to build new things for this moment. And why would there have been a way to organize pro wrestling fans into the Defiance before this moment in so many ways? And so, Miles, I'm kind of workshopping live on air with you always. What piece of infrastructure didn't previously exist because there was no good reason to have them that need to exist now to make sure that we can win this moment. Shout out to all the fans in Las Vegas, of all places. This isn't like a match taking place in, Los Angeles or San Francisco as well, right? It's in Las Vegas. It's neutral territory. It was wonderful to see.
Yeah, it was. And look, I've got to say, Xander, like, I'm a very pro law enforcement guy, and even more specifically, like, pro DHS law enforcement. I spent years trying to build out that department. So it really says something for someone like me to have a smile on my face when that kind of chant is happening.
Yeah.
And I do, because that department I once knew has gone so far off the deep end and is violating Americans' constitutional rights on a daily basis. I think a chant like that is an anthem that all Americans should be chanting. Let's take a couple of questions from members of defiance.org. Lori Taylor, great last name, Lori, asks, can we have an update on the pocket Constitution delivery? So those of you who aren't familiar, we just before the holidays offered the opportunity for people to buy constitutions to be delivered to members of Congress, and specifically to Republican members of Congress that support Donald Trump, with a message, a simple message on those constitutions. You swore an oath to this and not to a man. Remember that. Well, Lori, I'm pleased to tell you, and we've sent this out in a couple of notes to folks, but if you didn't see it, the constitutions will be delivered on the best possible day of the year, February 24th, which happens to be the day of Donald Trump's first State of the Union address since returning to the presidency. So the day that those members of Congress will sit on the House floor and see the president, that morning, they will receive from defiance.org members and supporters that Constitution delivered to their offices with a message. Tonight, you will see the president. You didn't swear an oath to him. You swore an oath to this. Now, Lori will also be live streaming those deliveries. And as we've teased, there will be they'll be delivered by special folks that day. So I think that's all I can say on that front, but it'll be exciting. And you'll see Xander and I there doing some of the deliveries with some other special guests. So we're really excited to make that happen. And if anyone bought Constitutions and gave those as a gift over the holidays, we urge you to have folks sign up for free at defiance.news to get the news and updates and be able to watch those live streamed deliveries. But believe me, it's going to send a message.
We've got another question from Sass Rider. Can Miles please explain or expand on what he mentioned this morning about drafting lawsuits?
Sass Rider, one of the things that I was saying is that state attorneys general and local prosecutors should prepare to sue the Trump administration for election meddling. We now already have a clear enough example of what happened in Fulton County that other districts around the country, especially places that are swing districts, should be prepared that this could happen. I mean, we went from a month ago speculating about Donald Trump meddling in elections, saying he wished he'd seized ballots. You could go back a month ago and see people dismissing that New York Times interview. I think that was almost a month ago today. That New York Times interview where Donald Trump said he wished he seized ballots in 2020. And people, on social media on the right have said, the Trump wasn't being serious. He was joking. He didn't really mean seizing ballots. Really? Fast forward just a couple of weeks, and FBI agents are literally showing up in a contested county in Georgia and seizing ballots. My worry, Sass Rider, is he has now normalized that. He has now made this look like it's something that happens in the course of business. Who's to say the president, after the midterm elections, won't say there's the 10 most contested congressional races. I'm going to claim there was fraud and send the FBI to seize the ballots. It's not lawful for them to do that for partisan political purposes, which is clearly what's motivating this. And so we need district attorneys and, like I said, state attorneys general prepared the moment something like that happens to go to a judge and to stop it while it is happening, to get an order to stop those things. That's how prepared we need to be. Now, as Xander and I have talked about a lot, we're starting more and more of these conversations with with local prosecutors, district attorneys, and state attorney generals and secretaries of state around the country. I know some of them are thinking that way. I don't think all of them are thinking that way. And so that's something that hopefully as a club, defiance.org, we can do is help facilitate that level of preparation. Xander, I'm going to throw another question out there from one of our members, from Diane Patrice Perry, who says, is there anything we can do to stop the Trump administration from purchasing warehouses throughout the country to convert them to detention centers? I want to take this one, Xander, but then also give you a chance to answer because it hits close to home. I will tell you, Diane, you probably read about what happened in Hanover County in Hanover, Virginia. I've got a lot of friends and family who live near a warehouse that ICE wanted to purchase to turn into a detention facility. And do you know what happened in Hanover County when this went down near Ashland? The people showed up in droves. I think the reporting was that hundreds of people showed up, by the way, to I think it was a county commissioner meeting where all of the commissioners were elected Republicans. And guess what? They were so scared by the public outcry that they said that they were going to deny the petition, basically, to approve that. And then the owner of the warehouse said that he was not going to complete the sale. It worked. People power actually worked. So my answer, Diane, is at all of these warehouses around the country, people need to do what happened in a deep red county in Virginia. Even in a deep red county, people showing up and saying, hell no, we don't want this in our backyard, worked. It worked. And so I hope that people look at that map of all the places ICE is purchasing those warehouses and do everything they can to urge local government to do something. The answers aren't going to be federal anymore. They're going to be local. They're going to be with you. Xander, what do you think?
When I spent time in the fight to end mass incarceration, which was a significant chunk of my career, I don't know, call it 6 to 8 years, fighting. You mean
working mass incarceration? When you say that, it makes it sound like you spent 6 or so years incarcerated.
In mass, fighting to end mass incarceration. Sorry. Reducing beds is a key strategy. If beds are there, they will be filled. There's so much profit incentive to fill up detention centers that the mechanisms just influence policy. And so the inverse is also true. If you can shut down prisons, or in this case, stop the building of them, stop the building of detention centers, there's nowhere to put those bodies, and the policies have to react to that. Whether it means that they have to let people, go on probation, parole, pretrial release, etc. And so it's actually one of the most effective strategies is just the reduction of beds available to incarceration. And to your point, there's a bunch of tried and true strategies around there. There's a group called Worth Rises that's been fucking fantastic across the board at fighting the prison industrial complex. And we should have their leader on sometime soon to answer exactly this question.
Yeah, that would be good. 2 final things. One is I did find that James Madison quote, Xander, because you didn't take the time that I bought you in the stream to go find it.
You know what? I actually did. ChatGPT failed me. I was like, show me that quote from yesterday.
What's that quote? Going back to earlier when we were talking about why does the federal government not administer elections, James Madison warned in Federalist number 59, those essays to sell the American public on the U.S. Constitution, that if the federal government controlled elections, it could, quote, pervert its powers into instruments for destroying the very existence of the Union by manipulating the rules to entrench itself in office. Well, geez, Xander, that's the thing that we're all scared about with Trump manipulating elections, is it seems that he wants to do so in 2020 and present day to maintain his power. That's why we're worried. That's why James Madison was worried. That's why we should all be worried, but not just worried. That's why we should be taking action. That's why defiance.org is all about action. We're action to do these things. And we've been on a blitz of conversations behind the scenes and on this program with folks doing election security to get their advice on where we can be most effective. And Xander, I actually have to circle with you offline about one of those conversations I had with one of our friends, former Pennsylvania Secretary of State, about some suggested ways that the club could have even more impact. We have another question here from Jenny B. Xander, you want to take this one?
Where are we at? I'm looking. Random question. What is the dress code on the 24th? Do we have something to put up to share what the dress code is on the 24th?
I'd say look in the lower left port. Is that the lower left or the lower right? Just look down there in the screen where there's a frog.
We want you to look something like that. If you can.
You have to dress exactly like a frog, and you must build a lily pad for yourself. Sorry, them's the rules. The dress code for folks who are showing up to the rebuttal to the State of the Union is green. Wear green. And then if you want to dress up like a frog, you can. If people want to bring merch, they can. But go check out defiance.org/SOTU, SOTU, if folks want to know more about the rebuttal to the State of the Union, which we are calling State of the Swamp. But wearing green is what we're hoping. We want it to be a sea of green. There will be frog suits. There will be frog merch. It's going to be a great opportunity to embrace that symbol of the defiance, the frog. I really do want to encourage folks, if you've bought a ticket to attend in person, if you bought a virtual ticket, or even if you're just planning on watching the free live stream, please share this out with folks. We don't want people to be watching Donald Trump's State of the Union on CBS or Fox News or these other places where they're just going to hype him up. We have put together a lineup of extraordinary people that ain't us, that are other folks, pro-democracy leaders in this country, elected leaders, celebrities, nonprofit heads, to tell the truth about the state of our union and what the president has done in the past year that he has been in office. So please, 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 if I want to ask for you, share this out. We want to get the message out far and wide. And Xander and I haven't talked about this, but I kind of think we should do this every year, Xander. I think every year Trump, until he's gone, does his State of the Union, we should do this and make it bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger until he's embarrassed because it's bigger than his. Unfortunately, the venue we chose this year, it's a good venue. It's the National Press Club, but it doesn't allow us to have more people inside than the U.S. House Chamber. The U.S. House Chamber can fit, I don't know, it's probably like 600 or 700 if you include the gallery. I think next year we should make it our goal that we have more people in attendance in person. at the State of the Union rebuttal than Donald Trump has in person at his.
It's a great idea. It's a great idea. Different theme each year too. It'll be fun. We need to keep the fight for democracy fun. Otherwise, we're all going to get worn out. I'm fired up about it. I'm fired up about being a frog. It'll be my first time. I was out with the froggies on Saturday. It was a good time. It's incredible how much energy gravitates towards you if you're in one of those suits. The whole protest was going nuts, lining up to take pictures with them. So I'm excited for my froggy day for sure.
Wait, Xander, where did you see him?
It was a protest here in my hometown in Gresham. They were out and about. Yeah.
That's good. That's good, man. I was going to do one last thing on here because I promised it before. I'm just going to keep doing that until I see our producer freak out. Here we go.
That's the thing, like how much, like.
I know we played that once.
Like down below.
That's me in a frog suit. I'm very, very excited to don this frog suit.
You look nimble. You look more nimble than the other frogs I was around.
That's true.
You were moving pretty good.
I was testing how effective, this thing was for really getting after it. Anyway, hopefully more folks will join us wearing those at protests, at events, including the one on February 24th. So join us. State of the Swamp. Check it out. Defiance.org/SoTo. That's it for today, folks. Thank you for joining Defiance Daily Dispatches for the Defiant. We're sorry that we didn't have our special guest here today. Scheduling conflicts prevented him from joining us, but join us tomorrow at 5 p.m. Eastern for a conversation with the amazing Scott Galloway, professor at New York University's Stern School, best-selling author, and the pro-democracy champion behind Resist and Unsubscribe. So join us for that conversation. Xander, anything else to send us out?
Yeah, I mean, I had one thought as we were talking about this. Sorry if I'm decelerating us out.
That was such an anticlimax. Xander, sit down with a zing.
I did want to share this because I thought it was important, and we talked about, I spoke briefly about justice reform. America has a feature right now that is allowing this to happen to us, which is the poverty that many, many Americans are living into, that allows people like Trump, like our federal government, like corporations, to use poor people as their instruments for coercion and oppression. One of the sad things when you look into the prison space is that most of the correctional officers are from the same neighborhoods as the people who are locked up. Think about that.
Yeah.
And so we have over, I think 60% of this country doesn't have $1,000 in their bank account. And now they're getting $50,000 signing bonuses, if they sign up to hurt their fellow countrymen. So as I thought about the different systemic issues we need to address as we come out of these things, one of those things is trying to find a way to stabilize our fellow countrymen so they cannot be coerced into oppressing each other. That's on my mind. I've seen it for decades now in this country. You definitely see it when you're in the justice reform space, that people who become police or correctional officers, oftentimes from similar backgrounds. And I just want to put that bullet. That's not something we're going to solve before the midterms, is poverty in America, but I just want to flag that as one of the unique features in America that doesn't exist in Europe, who, by the way, also had a lot of rightward nationalist movement, but didn't see this play out. That's one of the unique features in this country that didn't exist over there. And I think it's why we're seeing a lot of what we're seeing today is the desperation that other people are in and their willingness to compromise their morals and their integrity to keep themselves and their family safe and alive.
Well, I will say this. Adam Schiff made a very powerful point yesterday on social media, and he highlighted the fact that the Department of Homeland Security is promoting that you are going to get a fast track to affordable housing if you turn in your neighbors that are illegal immigrants. And you know what he pointed to? Another country that did this. That was Nazi Germany. Encouraged you to rat out your neighbors and you would get benefits for it. And what I will say, Xander, is that's why we're fighting. That's why you're fighting. That's why I'm fighting. That's why the people on here are fighting. And I got good news for folks. They're not going to win. I'm not just saying that to buck myself up. The American people do not support this anymore. They don't support this administration anymore. And the bottom is falling out for Donald Trump. And the more that we recruit other people to join the resistance, to join the defiance, the more likely we are to put an end to all of this and the abuses of power sooner. So we hope to see you at State of the Swamp, either in person or virtually. We hope to continue these conversations with you and to take real action to answer that question that you all asked that led us to start this. What can I do? We're going to keep giving you answers until this is over. And until then, thank you, friends. As always, stay loud, stay brave, and stay together. We'll see you tomorrow.